Hey listeners, powered up by Mazer Group, this is the Turnin Dirt podcast. I'm your host, John Mazer. And we're rolling.
We're on.
Yeah, we're on.
How are you?
Fantastic, Rhett. How are you?
Well, I'm on Turnin Dirt, so
Yep.
how can I be any better than what's
good stuff.
happening here today? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming. I wanted to do this.
Me.
The time is 10, temperature 4 degrees. Did you ever call time and temperature?
Time
in
and
Brandon?
temperature in
Yeah.
Brandon,
Yeah. Do you know the number?
You know, I did a few years ago.
Yeah.
It
was something I called.
Yeah.
And they want to say it's 7278454 or something like that.
Sounds right. Close anyways.
I always wanted to master the sound or the pitch of the person's voice.
It was pretty cool.
It was.
I mean,
yeah.
at least we thought it was.
It was, yeah. And then Rhett hit the mic for auctioning, and then that was the voice we all wanted to be.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I know about that.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yes, no problem. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Rhett. For our listeners, Rhett is what we call owner, president, partner, major partner, the lifeblood of Whitewood Livestock Services.
You bet.
Right
Yep.
on. And you've been there. Well, let's take it back here because we're just talking about high schools. Rhett and I went to the same high school. Noah's in studio today. He's my next episode. We all graduated from Vincent Massey High School in Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Noah and I were class of 2000. You were?
Well, I was a little bit ahead of you.
Yeah.
1995.
95.
Yeah.
I was going to say 92. Yeah.
It must be the gray in the beard, eh?
Yeah, I got a little patch in my hair myself, so I can't say anything. I caught your brother Chad when he was in grade 12. I was in grade 9.
Yep.
So I knew I wasn't going to get beat up. It was good to have that guy.
No.
Good to have him around, yeah.
No, well, I remember, obviously, and I think we'll get into some of the history, family history. And, I remember when you were born. I mean, I was 5, but I still remember, meeting you for the first time.
All 8 pounds, 8 ounces of me.
Yeah, you've grown up.
Yeah, I have.
A little bigger since then.
Yeah, a little bit more vocabulary.
Yeah, just a goo gaga.
Yeah.
And now podcast.
Yes, it's crazy. And we have, in saying that, we do have a lot of history together, Rhett. And I'm sure you've seen them, but my mother has put pictures of us, like we're in, you, Chad, Andrew and I are in a bed at the cabin, just doing our friend thing, watching a movie or whatever, which is fun. Don't have any in the bathtub, which is good.
No, that's good.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch you in high school, but it's a damn shame.
Unfortunately, I was moving on just as you were kind of getting there, to Massey.
Yeah.
Massey.
Yeah. What happened after high school for you?
What happened after high school? Well, I took off to U of M, University of Manitoba, for a year. I was kind of undecided what I wanted to do. I kind of thought possibly law, and so I went into U of M. I probably should have stayed at BU, Brandon University.
Yeah.
But the girl I was dating went to U of M, and sometimes you follow somebody like that.
I get it. Yep.
And I went into Winnipeg for a year, came home. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Still didn't know?
No,
Yeah.
And my dad, so I worked as a waiter. I worked at an oil change place, Brandon Lube.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew I didn't want to work there forever. Yep. And Dad said to me in the fall, after university ended in the spring, in the fall, he said to me, would you want to take the auctioneer course? And I said, no, I'm not like you.
It was a no.
It was, right
off the bat, it was a no.
A flat out no. I was a lot more, I was shy.
Sure.
Compared to today. I remember that came out of my shell, and auctioning brought me out of that shell. But my dad said, well, why don't you take it? It won't hurt. There's a good business course. Whether you ever auction, there's stuff you can learn from the course.
Yep.
And I kind of thought, well, why not? Like, what do I got to lose? So I went and I took the course. It was about a 2-week course down in Mason City, Iowa. That's where my dad went. And they do teach you kind of how to kind of get started auctioning. But I mean, you need to practice and practice and practice.
Yeah.
But a lot of the behind the scenes, like how to operate an auction, how you conduct an auction. So I took that in December of 96 and came back home just prior to Christmas. And in the start of 97, I started going out to Whitewood, and we had another market in Manitoba at Pipestone. And I would go out there, and I mean, I didn't know nothing about cattle. I hardly knew the difference between a steer or a heifer.
I still don't, so you're going to have to explain that at some point here.
I grew up in Brandon.
Yeah.
My dad was in the business. They started Pipestone in 1985. And when I first went out, everybody was welcoming. And my dad had, my dad's my dad. He's very well liked. We're very well respected. And so it gave me the opportunity to come in. And I know I was fortunate. I had opportunities that not everybody is granted. The buyers treated me good as a new auctioneer, and they, so many people helped me along the way, but it was something that I never thought I would do it.
Yeah.
And today I'm so grateful that I did,
yeah.
And it was just a simple conversation. My dad said, take it. And I said flat out, no.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, well, it was just, no. I remember saying, I'm not like you.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that as an insult.
No.
I just meant,
personality wise,
you're outgoing and you're you, and I'm not that way. And when I do tell that story today, people kind of almost don't believe that.
Yeah.
Because I think I am a lot like my dad now. So,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
Because I will say to our listeners, if anybody's met Gene, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, he's a fucking beauty, like an absolute beauty. And you explain him exactly right. He's personable. He's easy to get along with. And he tells the greatest stories too.
Yeah. He's
like the greatest stories.
Yeah. He could have been a storyteller in another lifetime. He does have so many, and he tells them at the markets. And I can remember over the last number of decades that I've been working at those markets, they'll get him to tell a story again and again and again. Every few years there's a water slide story, which,
I can't believe you said that. It's the best story he tells, right?
and I can't do it credit, but, he can tell. He just has the gift of the gab. And that is one thing, I do think that my dad and I have a lot of similar characteristics, but he can tell a story better than me. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Yeah.
Well, he's a storyteller. And I mean, it's funny that you mentioned it was kind of your transition from an introvert to an extrovert, because your dad was always an extrovert. And I remember it's great that you date the Pipestone livestock, because I always remember Parks auction and hearing on the radio 727-2828. Yeah. It's funny because we're 781-2828 here at the dealership. Yeah. So there's some history there. So that's awesome. Yeah. So I back once more, I just cannot, I can fathom, but it's very interesting that in order for you to say no to initially when your dad asked you to go to the auction school. Yeah. Up until that point, you had probably told yourself a million times, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that.
Well, and I didn't even really think about it. Yep. It wasn't even so much saying no to myself. It just wasn't something that I wasn't familiar with it. I'd been to lots of auctions because my dad was an auctioneer.
Yeah.
But the cattle side, growing up in the city, was fairly new to me.
Yeah.
I would go to the odd cattle sale with my dad when I was a kid, but that was more to spend a bit more time with dad.
Absolutely,
than actual auction.
Yeah.
And when I got into it, steer and a heifer, and for those listeners out there or anybody else maybe in studio, a steer is a male calf. It would be a castrated calf. A heifer is a female that hasn't had a calf. A cow is a female that has had calves. And then there's bulls, which are intact, non-castrated males.
Full males.
Full males.
Yeah.
Wow, you just broke that down in the best
perfectly,
way.
Right?
I've known a few heifers in my time, but I didn't know there were so many different categories of that. So now I could be around the supper table going, "Hey,
absolutely,
I know the difference between a bull, and a steer,
and the lingo in Yellowstone now."
Exactly.
Yeah, because I do think they maybe differentiate there, but I didn't know either.
Yeah.
So steer's
a castrated male. And a heifer is a young female.
Yeah.
Cow would be one that's had a calf.
Yeah.
And a bull is the sire.
Yeah.
What you would use for breeding for the most part.
Gotcha.
When you're going to have a steak, it's going to be a steer or a heifer. It won't be a cow or a bull.
Yeah.
a lot of hamburger, and some cheaper cuts, sausages, pepperoni, bologna.
Yep.
Come from cows and bulls and things like that. But the better cuts, steaks and prime rib and things like that, that'll be from a steer or a heifer that has been fed to that point.
Gotcha. So let's talk about that then. So I know I've been to Roost Chris in the States. All right. So they're a corn-fed steer, right?
Yep.
Okay. So they would have a specific feed lot they take them to, or a specific, in farming, you call it a grower, but I mean, like it's a processor.
Well, they'd have a supplier.
I gotcha. Okay.
A supplier, and I don't know exactly where they feed them, but there's from corn-fed beef to grass-fed beef. Yep. You'll see different commercials on TV saying, well, this is grass-fed beef or hormone-free, antibiotic-free. Some of that can be a little bit misleading. Yeah. Because all cattle are hormone-free and antibiotic-free by the time they are processed.
Right.
Some of that can be a little misleading. Grass-fed beef doesn't work real well in our country because coming shortly, we're probably going to have some snow here for the next 5-6 months. So, you see more grass-fed beef in southern countries. Brazil is a big supplier of grass-fed beef.
Yep.
But you can taste difference between corn-fed, grass-fed, grain-fed. Ontario feeds a lot of corn-fed beef, or there will be a lot of corn-fed beef. And if you haven't had it, there's a different kind of texture. Yep. I mean, I'm not talking night and day different.
Sure.
But there is a bit of a different texture, a different taste. But the one thing I can say about beef, and I'll give Canadian beef best beef in the world.
Yep.
I've been fortunate enough to travel to a lot of places around the world, and we have it very good. The U.S. is very comparable.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm splitting hairs, and maybe it's because I'm Canadian.
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
North American beef as a whole is the best beef in the world.
Yeah.
Bar none.
Yeah.
And if you travel to some other countries around the world, all you have to do is taste it.
Yeah.
So,
and you'll taste the difference.
Big time.
Yeah.
What makes North American beef the best?
Well, I think we have some of the best genetics, cattle genetics. It's been something that's changed. Now, prior to my time, you go back to the 50s and 60s, cattle at that time were a lot smaller than today. And you'll see pictures from fairs or what have you back there.
Yeah.
And the cattle, to me, kind of look funny because I wasn't familiar with them. They're full grown, but they were significantly smaller.
Yep.
Now, back in the 80s, I guess, is when they started seeing more of some of these breeds. I believe some of the Charolais cattle started coming, Simmental cattle started coming to Canada, North America. Yep. And from then, they've continued to improve genetics and crosses between cattle.
Yeah.
Back in the early 80s, if you go to the agribition in some of those sale barns, you'll see that there's some pictures from back in the early 80s, and they'll have cattle that the guys can hardly see over their back. They're standing behind them, and it's all leg.
Oh, really?
They got these real tall legs and then kind of almost like a narrow body.
Yeah.
And again, those cattle to me look, I don't want to say look poor, but if they come into the market today looking like that, they wouldn't be a top seller.
Yeah.
And so it's I think a combination of everything that's taken place. Cattle producers today are using better genetics, better breeding stock, resulting in better cattle, and the proof is on the plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And so importing different
breeds.
Different breeds, yeah. Yep. So that led to that. And funny that you say that the cattle were smaller, 70s, 80s than they are today, because typically an auction mart sells by the pound.
Yep.
Do they not?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, and that's what, kind of an expression you'll hear us say at the market is somebody brings in, maybe they bring in their calves and they're weighing 500 and 600 pounds, and they'll have, one bigger one, maybe at 750 pounds. Well, that was my biggest steer, they'll say. And it's like, well, that's a good thing because we still sell by the pound. That's just a way of saying pounds pay.
Yeah.
In the market, in the auction market business, just a quick overview. the smaller the calf, the more per pound it brings. Generally, there's always some exceptions, but basically the smaller the calf, the more per pound it brings. But the dollars, there'll be more dollars for the heavier animals.
Right.
So,
yeah.
We're in some good times here right now. The last few years, we're seeing record high prices in the Canadian cattle industry. But in saying that, it's been a long time to get us here.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of bumps in the road,
We had a real big bump.
Yeah. We're going to talk about
20
that.
years ago. So yeah, we can get into that.
Yeah.
But it's such an enjoyable business. The people that you work with, and the cow calf producer, farmers in general. But I'm kind of more with the cattle producer than the egg producer, and there's lots of crossover too.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
But they're not looking for a handout. They work hard. They just want to be treated fairly.
Absolutely.
And what we're seeing here taking place right now is, I go home after a sale and I reflect on the day, and these are some of the best times I've ever had.
So you're having some
industry.
finally moments,
Yes.
like where you've been in the industry that long or this long, and the prices to a point where like the guys are seeing some gravy now.
Yeah. Well, the other day, just a couple of days ago, Tuesday, we had our sale. Every Tuesday we have a sale at the market.
Yeah.
And we had our biggest sale ever. It was 3,700 cattle. And the market was at an all-time record high. So it was the most dollars we'd ever, gathered.
Yeah.
The highest prices we'd ever seen. The biggest number of cattle. I couldn't have, the sale went smooth.
Yeah.
Smooth as can be. And I owe a lot of credit to my staff.
Yeah.
Our staff does an amazing job week in and week out. And at this time of year, we work some long hours.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah.
But and the last few weeks have kind of been the same thing. We've had very large sales, very successful sales.
Yeah.
And going home and thinking about it. And then usually Dad gets back to Brandon.
Yeah.
And he calls me and he says, wasn't that quite a sale?
Yeah.
And it's just
wasn't that quite a sale?
we're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
This is, it's brought the fun back to the business. It's brought good times back, and producers are getting paid and getting paid for their product and the hard work they do.
Yeah. So it's good. Good time to be in the cattle business, you could say.
It is.
You didn't always say that.
No. And it was,
yeah.
I don't know if we want to talk about it
Let's
now.
do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
2003
Well,
BSC?
that's exactly what I wanted. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it was Noah that said to me, because there was a moment it hit, right?
Yep.
Like
May the 20th.
Yeah, May the 20th of 2003, right? So, and was there a sale on?
Well, there were, we sold, at that time, Monday was our day at Pipestone.
Yeah.
And Thursday was our sale day at Whitewood.
Yeah.
Now it's Tuesday, but at that time it was Monday and Thursdays were our regular sale. And so we'd had our sale Monday. Tuesday, we kind of wake up like any other Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. Yep. Yeah.
There were sales going on at other markets, and I wasn't at one of those markets, but I've heard the kind of how the story went.
Yep.
They're selling cattle. Cattle were bringing, whatever price they were bringing at the time. I want to say,
you say an average, right?
You say $1.20 a pound, $1.30 a pound, $1.40 a pound on some calves. And all of a sudden, I've heard it from different auctioneers and kind of tell the same story. They're selling, they get, an hour or two into the sale, and then a phone rings. And then a phone rings, and the buyers are sitting across from the auctioneer, and a phone rings, and a phone rings, and just
the buyers' phones.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just all of a sudden, everybody's on the phone.
Yeah.
And the phone lines, the actual landlines of the market.
Yeah.
Call for so and so, call for so and so, and everybody's on their phone, and something's up.
Yeah.
And something big is up because it all kind of happening.
Yeah. Real time, almost like.
And nobody's bidding. They've just kind of quit bidding whatever was kind of in the ring. And anyhow, they continued, a couple markets I'd talked to, they continue selling a few, but the market dropped right now pretty significantly. And so basically they would cancel the sale. They canceled the sales.
Mid-sale.
Yeah, mid-sale.
Mid-sale.
Call and say, John, come pick up your cattle. BSE, mad cow, is kind of what it was referred to in the media, but BSE is kind of the technical name, bovine spongy. It's a long, kind of complicated name.
Yep.
BS.
Yeah.
BSE.
Let's say,
mad cow.
Sure, mad cow. Let's do it. Yeah.
And so they would call and come pick up your cattle. In hindsight, which is always 2020,
Of course.
they likely should have sold them that day. But I don't, I would have done the same thing had we had a sale.
Yep.
Because how do I explain to you as the customer, you were expecting this price and you got this price?
Yeah.
In hindsight, it would have been better to take that price that day.
Yeah. Because it went
it continued to decline.
Yeah.
It was the biggest agriculture disaster in Canadian history. We lost, as a result of it, nearly 40% of our national herd. Now, it didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
It took years. There wasn't a lot of government help.
Really?
Really, there wasn't. And a couple of programs they did come out with likely actually made it worse. They had good intentions.
Yeah.
There was a program that was a set-aside program which kind of got you to hold some cattle longer, which they thought, well, we'll get through this issue, and then it'll be better. It just put the volumes up, and it didn't correct itself. BSE, the borders basically shut right around the world to our cattle. And, I kind of sometimes say BSE was almost named correctly, but they put an E on the end.
Yeah.
We were testing for it, and we would have, 1 in a million is considered a natural occurrence, whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
Feed, animal remnants, feeding animal byproducts back to animals was what they believe caused it. I think it was 1997 when Canada banned that, and the U.S. actually was behind us. I want to say it was around 2000 that they banned feeding back animal byproducts back to cattle and such. But it just decimated cows that were worth 65 and 70 cents a pound on a 1,500 pound animal were worth 3 and 4 and 5 cents.
Really?
Wow.
Cattle, so like I said, we didn't have a sale that day, but we did have one on Thursday, or we're going to have one. We canceled it Thursday, and we didn't run any sales at either of our markets until late August or September. Like, we were right down.
Oh, so that was May, and then your first sale again was August.
Yeah. Late August, or it might have even been September.
Yep.
And that's, cattle, for the most part, calves are born in the spring. They get turned out on pasture through the summer. And in the fall time, that's your busy time. And some producers move them in September, some October, some November. Some will keep them through the winter too. But every day I would wake up and I'd go online and type BSE or border closures, anything. And I would be checking it multiple times a day.
Yep.
And I remember my dad one day said, why are you checking it? And I, just hoping there was something, there was
something positive,
a little bit good news, and maybe we're going to see this border open. And he was right. We would have known if there was a border announcement or something, we would have known in very short order. But I was, you were just fingers crossed,
Yep.
And it was difficult. I mean, it was obviously difficult for so many reasons, but, from the market standpoint, I would have, producers and grown men calling, and this went on for years. It wasn't just a few months. It took years before, almost a better part of a decade before we actually saw things kind of get back to a level that was somewhat kind of acceptable.
So you're talking like early teens.
Yeah.
Like from 2003 until like
2010, 11, 12.
Really?
You know, I mean, it kind of gradually got better bit by bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, all other costs kept going up too.
Of course it did. Yeah.
Inflate, regular
fuel,
inflation,
like everything. Yeah.
Everything
it takes to look after them. Yeah.
You know, I'd get calls from producers, like grown men, and they'd cry.
Yeah.
And, you know, as from the marketing side, after a while, that gets hard on you.
Of course it would.
Because all your, you know, and I mean, I'd see it. We would sell the cattle. Producers were good. You know, they knew that we didn't set the market. You know, if it was up to me, we were going to be selling cattle at high prices. And if it was up to the buyers. But it was still, I mean, we had cattle too. So, I mean, it wasn't that I didn't feel it in that regard.
Yeah.
But there was good, I'm not talking like poor operator. I'm talking good operators, good operations that lost everything. And maybe they expanded into cows, you know, the year or two before, or maybe in the week or the month or two before.
Yeah.
We lost a generation plus of young producers, cattle producers.
Yeah.
Where if you were just starting out, you had nothing to kind of fall back on. And then what we saw thereafter was you weren't telling your son or your daughter to get in the cattle business because we didn't know how long it was going to take. And every time a calf was born, you kind of knew in the back of your head, by the time I go to sell that, I'm going to be this much short.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to cost me this much to raise the cow and to winter and feed the cow year round, take care of it. And when I go to sell that calf, I'm not going to have enough
what it took to raise it.
To raise it. And it went on, like I said, for years. So
there was no government intervention for insurance sorry, that's not government, but there was no insurance for these people losing those dollars on those cattle?
No.
And no government support?
Minimal government support. And I'm not here to criticize government. You know, I think part of the problem was we didn't know what to expect. You know, when it first happened, we maybe kind of thought, well, we'll be better in a few days or a week or a month.
Yeah.
Well, we're going into summer. Summer's our quiet time. So by the time we get back into our busy time in the fall, this will all be behind us.
Yep.
And it wasn't. And so to this currently, I mean, we now have regulations in place that we have had cases of BSE since.
Yeah.
The problem was we didn't have the right regulations in place at the time.
Right.
We test for it. It doesn't enter the food chain. Even if if there was a hamburger sitting in front of me and it came from a cow that had BSE, I would eat it.
Yeah.
They believe if you were to eat enough and like a lot and a lot and a lot,
continued exposure,
that there could be some side effects.
Yeah.
But you know, I would, if there was one here, I'd eat it. Now it would never enter the food chain because we do test for it. In the States, sometimes there was talk that sometimes those animals disappeared, and you know, I'm not knocking the U.S. or anything like that, but we now have regulations in place. We can have up to 1 in a million head, and that works out to I think 6 or 7 cases a year where we can stay at our minimal status. Borders are open, and that was the problem. That we had such a supply of cattle, and we were an exporter. And so when the borders shut, and it wasn't just the American border, but they were our biggest trading partner. We couldn't eat our way out. I remember the summer of 2003. I thought I was going to eat it. Well, not thought. At Kelsey's or O'Kelly's in Brandon. I was going to eat a steak every day, and I pretty well did. Like I probably had 80 steaks in 90 days. And it was me kind of saying, I'm going to do all I can. But it didn't matter whether it was me and the rest of the country. We couldn't eat our way.
We just had a glut of meat.
We couldn't eat our way out of it. So thankfully, you know, regulations are in place today where we have had cases since.
Yep.
But it hasn't had the same impact.
It doesn't affect the market or anything. Yeah.
No, but it's still something that makes producers nervous.
Yep.
It's been a little bit since we had a case. But the last one I can kind of, and occasionally you don't even hear about it the day of.
Yep.
Now, it might be a couple of days and it's like, oh, well, and that's a good thing because it's not like, oh, put up our hands, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
But one of the last ones that had showed up here a year or two ago, a producer called me and said, oh, I heard about it. And we had known about it for a couple of days. How's this going to affect the market? And I remember saying, well, actually, it hasn't. The market's stronger today than it was last week.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't stronger because of that. It was just the market working itself.
Yeah.
But, so when I say, we've been waiting for these record high prices, we have been. Now, part of that is because of what took place with BSE.
Yep.
We lost 40% of our herd. Again, it wasn't overnight. It took a number of years, but that is what came from BSE.
Yep.
You combine that with, things even in the last 10 years weren't super great. They were definitely better than the 10 prior.
Yeah.
2014, 15, we saw record high prices followed by record high cattle feeding losses. Things got on almost like a runaway train downhill.
Yeah.
And so we did see, the market go up and prices improve and get as good as we'd ever seen.
Yeah.
But it was fairly short-lived.
Yeah.
And so we continue to see an exodus from the business. And now when we look at without BSE or without losing that 40% of the herd, there's been droughts and, some dry areas. Alberta's experienced it maybe a little bit more so than what we saw here last year. It was dry, but it wasn't dire, at least in a lot of areas.
Yep.
The states have seen, some droughts. They've seen some big winter storms that have wiped out a number of cattle. But that is part of the reason we're seeing what we're seeing.
Yep.
Record high prices. We've got the lowest cattle numbers, they'll say back to the 1950s in North America. And I don't believe that there was any more cattle in the 40s. I think maybe that's when they started keeping accurate records.
Sure. Yep.
You'll hear in Canada the late 80s, but when you combine it, it'll be back to the 1950s. As I had said, cattle at that time were smaller. They're bigger today. They're not twice as big today.
No.
But the population of North America alone was 140 million in the States at that time to 380 million today. Canada was about 14 million, and we're approaching 40.
Really?
So, that's what we're dealing with. And with the low supply numbers, we're seeing record high prices. So, I would have loved to have seen these prices for everybody.
Yeah.
But then I also have to kind of take a step back and realize that if everybody was still in the cattle business, we wouldn't be seeing these prices.
Yeah.
So supply and demand.
Man, what a great story. And you're just as good at telling the story as your dad, I might add. I had like five.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, give her, man.
Sorry. I'm not part of the ag industry or I'm a little green here.
Yep.
But so mad cow, what I just did some research. It's bovine spongiform encephalopathy.
Sounds pretty. Yeah, that's very right.
Yeah, correct.
There was a protein in the brain it was a brain disease that would make them die, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So is at the end of the day, what is affecting your job is I can't sell a product that I know is unhealthy enough that could actually pass away prior to it generating the revenue it was built to generate.
No, it wasn't even that. I mean, we had one case, out of millions of cattle. So it wasn't like we had an outbreak or anything, and it wasn't transmittable between, cow to cow.
So was it like a stock where people get nervous when they start hearing bad press around a product? Was it overhyped?
Well, it was overhyped. I remember the Oprah, and there's only one Oprah, right? Like we all know who I'm talking about. But Harpo, Oprah. It was on her show, kind of right when it came out, and And I think it was kind of at a time just where there wasn't a lot happening. There wasn't a lot of news stories taking place, and this one just kind of caught the attention. But the biggest problem was that when the borders shut, that just locked us in. We just had more cattle than we could ever, consume in Canada, and we had nowhere we could ship them.
Yep.
And, there was places that eventually would take them, and eventually the borders would start opening, one by one and slowly.
Yep.
But it took a long time.
Yeah.
And that was, it was disappointing because there was nothing wrong with 99.99999% of all cattle. And
I see.
And actually, it is more prevalent in sheep, a lot more prevalent in sheep than, but mad sheep disease doesn't have the same kind of connotation to it. So.
Yeah. So when the phone started ringing there at that auction, it was because one cow had it.
Yeah.
And do you know where it was?
I think it was in a plant. Like it would have went to a plant, and then
they would have tested it at the plant.
At the plant, and like I said, it wouldn't enter the meat itself, wouldn't enter the food supply.
Yeah,
I think it was out. I think it was out west. I'd say on Alberta. I mean, there's only a couple major packing plants across the country, but it was just kind of just like a waterfall effect, or 9/11 would have been kind of a similar type event. I mean, I'm not putting them on the same level.
No, but
kind of an event where if you were in a public place, you could see it kind of happen. You might not know what was happening, but if you were in a crowd, phones would start ringing. And, maybe we didn't have phones quite to the same degree, but, all of a sudden it's just like boom, 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 boom. And everybody's kind of finding out from different, from they're buying for feedlots, from their customer, from the buyer's customers. It's all kind of happening at, one, relatively in seconds. Everybody's kind of getting the same report. But nobody knew what it was. We knew what it was, but nobody knew what the outcome was going to be. Or, will this be done next week or tomorrow? Or, so should we just keep buying cattle? Well, it was something that was, such a difficult time. Yeah. And so many years to follow.
Yeah.
And today, I said that it took out a generation plus of young cattle producers. So when I started into the business, I was like 97.
Yeah.
I was 19. And of course, I was a young person.
Yeah.
Well, almost 30 years later, because I'm 47, I'm considered a young producer today.
Yeah.
Still, and that's. Now, there are some more younger people in the last few years that are getting up, and I'm not saying there was none, but there wasn't near the younger producers. People in their 40s are considered, and as much as I want to pretend I'm still, 19 or feel 19, the reality is you wouldn't say it about a construction worker that was almost 50 that he's a young construction worker, or he's a young accountant, or a young machinery salesman. But in our industry, we do have a lot of older producers. Yeah. And so that's where I think we are going to continue to see this market stay strong. Yeah. Is the supply numbers right now, we don't see any expansion for at least a couple of years. And you can have an idea from that, from heifers that are retained to turn into cows. You combine that with the average age of producers. I've always said that they've pretty well been closer to my dad's age the whole time I've been in this business. Yeah. And my dad just turned 75 here a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Now they're maybe slightly closer to me. Yeah. But just. And so in the next 5 and 6 years, there's still going to be a number of producers getting out of the business because of age. Yeah. You can't fight age, regardless of how good the market might be or how mild the winter might be. And, everything could be working and going perfect. Yeah. But with age, age is age.
Age is age, yeah.
I don't bounce back as quick as I did 20 years ago.
None of us do, Rhett.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's okay. So a couple questions off that. And going to your, losing 40% of the herd. I have a motto that you see the good in everything. And I'm not saying, the BSE was a good thing, but was it a correction? Could you say it was a correction in the overall?
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, I would have liked to have seen us have better regulations in place.
Of course, yeah.
And that could have significantly lessened the blow.
Right.
However, was it a good thing? Well, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a good thing. But what we're seeing today without BSE, I don't think we would be seeing. So, you've got to look at it both sides. I mean, it was horrible to see what took place with producers.
Yeah, and for you to go through that too.
Lose farms, lose ranches. Yeah, there was nothing good came out of that. But the cattle market today is as strong as it's ever been because we have less cattle in the country or in North America, So I guess you can say there's a bit of a silver lining, but you wouldn't want to say that to somebody that, and I know what you were.
Yeah. Would not want to go through it again with and like you said, regulations in place that we probably wouldn't see on May 20th, 2003 again.
No, it should be, we should be, we have had some cases of BSE since.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it really isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And to anybody listening, don't worry we test for it.
Yeah. It's well regulated.
Yeah, it's well regulated.
Yeah.
So when we do get, and it doesn't happen often, but when we do have a case pop up, it doesn't enter the food chain. It is, they know which one it came from, and it's destroyed.
It's dealt with,
In 2003, was there a case of someone eating beef produced that got sick?
No.
So it was almost all speculation that caused this?
Well, that's kind of back to they almost named it right, but
BS,
BS, but they put an E.
Okay. That's the joke.
It sounds like there was just a lack of education on it. Mm-hmm. Like nobody knew, and it was just like, oh my God, this crazy disease is...
Canadians, they got behind the rancher. But like I said, we couldn't eat our way out of it.
Yeah.
And, there was different things. There was, 99-cent pound hamburger, and you would see Safeway have all Canadian beef. I know at O'Kelly's restaurant, at that time they were using American. I got them to switch. Friends of ours were involved in a restaurant back in Brandon.
Yep.
And I got them to go all Canadian beef. And since then, I think we have seen maybe a little more focus on, Canadian beef. And I think it's maybe supported a little better today than it was prior to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't, it was just I hope we never see anything like it again.
Yeah.
Could there be a couple of things? There could maybe be some things that are kind of unforeseen that could, hit the markets.
Yeah.
But, thankfully we do have regulations in place now that allow for, whether you want to say the odd blip on the radar or the odd animal. Again, it's not entering. Nobody, I think it's Dr. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease is what it is believed to, but I don't know that they've ever actually 100% confirmed it either. Is, I believe, the name of it, of what it, kind of the human factor.
Right.
And it would something to do with brain deterioration. But I think there's maybe been one person die from it.
Yeah.
There's more people.
Yeah.
More people die from choking on a piece of steak. Yeah. And I mean, as silly as that sounds, I mean that would be the truth.
Absolutely.
Choking on a bite of steak.
Yeah.
Than ever have from actual
Yeah.
BSE or mad cow.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm just flabbergasted because I never got the whole story right. And I mean, thank you so much for telling it. I want to circle back. Well, not circle back, but maybe for the listener that is hearing us talk about markets and how at that point, the market plummeted.
Mm-hmm.
Your business is, you have producers that raise cattle. You bring their cattle in and then you sell their cattle, which ultimately sets the market.
Yep.
So we have the amazing Canadian farmers doing it for us here. They're doing the raising, all that kind of stuff. They bring them to your auction. They bring them to your auction mart. Who's buying?
Well, whether it's my market or other markets across the country, we'll all have what we refer to as the buyers. Now they're professional buyers. That's what they do. They go market to market, buying cattle. They're going to be sourcing them for different customers, different feeders, different feedlots. Whether it be, the big number of feedlots are out east and out west, like Alberta, Ontario, some in Quebec. We do have some what we would kind of refer to as smaller feedlots. Now, when I say small, they're not tiny. I mean, they might be 10,000 head or 15,000 head.
Yeah.
But out in Alberta, you'll have 150,000
head in one
feedlots.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the American market too.
Yeah.
And so the American market can fluctuate with currency.
Yeah.
That, a low dollar helps the cattle producer, generally speaking, in relation to the American currency.
Yeah.
But the buyers for the most part are buying, they might be buying for some of the major plants, which are like Cargill, JBS, Tyson. They may be buying directly for them. They may be buying for someone such as whether it's yourself or a Johnny Mazer out in Alberta that wants to put 250 cattle into a feedlot pen, and I'm going to buy them at 500 pounds, and maybe I'll sell them when they get up to 800 pounds, or maybe I'll take them right through to finish, and a finished animal's around 1,550 pounds. That's kind of where you finish an animal, and it would go for processing.
Yeah.
So they cover, at our market, there's about a dozen buyers.
Yep.
And they cover basically all of North America.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we ship cattle to Quebec, Ontario, of course in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, ship them down through the States, Colorado, Kansas, pretty well anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
And it will be the same at different markets. We have different buyers. Some markets have more, some have less. Lots of the same buying firms or cattle buyer firms.
Yeah.
Whether they come to my market, then they'll go to another market that's kind of in our vicinity, and they'll have a routine, a route that they go market to market to market each day of the week.
Sure.
And we're, we've got a tremendous group of buyers that come to like our market or in our area.
Yeah.
In relationships that have been built up, started with my dad in a lot of their cases, and dad sometimes worked with their dads. It is kind of a tight-knit community of buyers, and I would say we're friends with them all too.
Sure.
We get along. I am producer orientated. That's who I kind of work for, but I do work for both parties. We're putting the transaction together. So we put the buyer and seller together.
Yep.
And I kind of say, well, I'm like 70% producer driven and I'm like 30% buyer driven.
Yep.
But if I can keep the buyers happy, they tend to keep my customers happy.
Yep.
And happy, I mean, strong prices.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
In the last couple of years, I mean, we've had probably as strong a market as anywhere.
Yeah.
We've had a real increase in our business the last couple of years, and it's been good to see. And again, I got to give credit where credit's due. Our staff here at Whitewood do a bang-up job each and every week. The buyers, they come and they support us, and they take care of my customers. So, there's only so much, either it's ourself or another market, that we can do. You can't turn a sow's ear into a silk purse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we can try to present the cattle, as best as we can. We want to maintain their health, keep them clean, keep them fed and watered. There's some things that we can do, and maybe we can increase that market, a couple cents here or a couple cents there. But you've got to have the product to begin with.
Yes.
So you need a quality animal to bring a quality price.
Yeah. Yeah. So it starts with the sellers and
basic economics, talks about supply and demand driving price. Is it as simple as that when you talk about the price per pound of a sale? Is it the more supply you have, the more we have to lower the price to liquidate it? And less we do, they're going to pay a little bit of a premium if they want to get this. Yeah. It's probably not that simple, but does that play a big role in that pricing?
Yeah, definitely to some degree. Other things, commodity prices. So whether we're talking grain or the corn, corn-fed beef, the grain that we use to finish those cattle, if those prices are lower, well, then you can finish an animal cheaper. And so then if you're finishing an animal cheaper, you could also sell it at a cheaper price in the store. What we have seen is right now we're seeing, like when I say record high prices, I remember selling my first $1 a pound calf. Now there had been $1 a pound calves prior to that, but I remember when I first started in like 97, I remember the first time I got to $1. And I was like 97, 98, 99. And then I'm like, $1? And I kind of look at my dad and he's like, nodding his head. Yeah. And I remember the first $2 calf that I sold. And I don't specifically remember the first $3 one, but I kind of remember when it happened. And now there's $4 and $5. And the other day we had calves, 350-pound calves up to $5.98. I mean, like $6 a pound.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
crazy, right?
Hence the supermarket prices.
Yeah. Well, and, we have seen beef go up in the store, but we haven't seen it go up to the same degree as what it has in the ring.
Yeah.
And I'll probably I don't know if any of the packing plants are watching, but so don't hate me. But for a long time, things weren't being divided very fairly.
Right.
You'd have the cow-calf producer looks after the mother cow 365 days a year. They look after that calf for, on average, maybe 6 to 8 months. Then they sell the calf. Buyers buy that calf. They ship it to a feedlot, to a feeder. And that feeder would have that calf, or it might go through 2 hands, at that point, for likely another 12 months, 14 months, it all depends, but, for a long period of time. So you have the cow-calf producer looks after the mother cow year-round, looks after the calf for quite a while. Then you have the feedlot or the feeder that's going to look after and put the pounds on it. Yeah. And then it would go to a packing plant. And the packing plant would basically have it for a day. And they'd get all the gravy. And then you get a little bit and you get a little bit. So we have seen the price in the store go up, but not to the same degree as what we've seen the market itself go up. Because the packing plants are actually starting to pay or share some of that
it's
money.
gotten better. The division of monies or whatever.
Proceeds, and
but that's not out of the goodness of their heart.
No.
There's a bigger reason.
Yeah, well, that's right.
So can you tell me what that big reason is? Is that they won't sell it because people aren't buying 12 pounds of ground beef?
Yeah,
$12 per pound?
I think it comes out of necessity for their survival. Because if we didn't see this market turn around, there would be nobody left growing, raising cattle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. If I kind of say, like, if I could go to a packing plant and say, how you could make $5,000 a head? They'd be like, how?
Yeah.
Well, it'll only happen once, because you won't pay anything for these cattle. They'll all come but there will be nothing behind them.
Right.
And so we've seen BSE, we saw cattle go out, a big decrease in the national herd numbers. There's been other conditions like drought and dry weather and things like that in the last number of years that have contributed. But there's also, it just wasn't a buoyant, nobody was getting rich raising cattle. And not that it's not that the rancher, that's not what it's about. I mean, we care about our cattle, and sometimes we get painted with a bit of a bad brush, whether it's, the cattle rancher or an auction market or a feed lot or, the industry, that all we care about is money. We don't care about the calf. That's like the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, these producers, they're out there at 30 below, 40 below calving cows. They're checking those cows at 1 in the morning, at 3 in the morning, at 5 in the morning. And they do this for 6-7 weeks in a row, and not in the summer. I mean, you're doing this in February, March.
Yeah.
Water bowls freeze up. Calves can get sick.
Yeah.
You treat them. You give them needles. You give them vaccinations. We care about our cattle. We care about them at the market.
Yeah.
And so, and even if you just said that we don't, all we care about is money, well, then we care about the cattle, because if we don't take care of them, then we wouldn't get the money.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, it sometimes we get painted with a bad, a bit of a bad brush, and you see this, you see something on the news, and there's a video of a Holstein cow on wet cement and it slips, and I've seen that video for so many different stories.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there are no bad apples.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what industry or what we're talking
There's always
about.
Gonna be,
There's always going to be. But 99.9% of producers are good people. They care about their cattle. They want the best for their cattle. And they take pride in their work. So, we're fortunate to have the producers that we have.
Yeah.
And the job that they do. And I said earlier, they're not looking for a handout.
No.
We're just looking to be treated
Fairly.
And with cattle, you kind of, it's a 365.
Yeah.
Like
the job's never done.
Kids. Now in the summer, you can turn them out to pasture, and you maybe don't have to be out there every day, but it's not that you turn them out on May 15th and then you come back on October 15th.
Check on them.
Yeah, let's just come. You're still checking on them and still taking care of them, or giving the odd one a vaccination. They might have an issue take place while they're out on pasture.
Yeah.
And so it's an ongoing process. All winter, they have to be fed basically every day.
Yeah.
So you might work with a neighbor or somebody that comes over and feeds your cows. So maybe you get away on a little bit of a vacation or a holiday, but it's a kind of a 365. It's like having, whether you have 50 extra kids or 100 or 200 or 300 extra kids, you've got to be there, and you've got to take care of them.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Amazing. Going back to, you did a great job of explaining kind of the way the industry works on, you have calf producers, then come to the calves come to market, all that. Is there producers out there that just have a cattle operation to take them to term, to take them just to processing? There
are. Prior to BSE, we did see more of that, where people would finish cattle. And you'd see at a market, lots of weeks we would have 50 or 60 fat cattle, kind of down at Pipestone, kind of each and every week. And that changed after BSE.
When we say fat cattle, those are to term, they're ready.
They're ready.
Yeah.
We call them fat cattle, finished cattle, but that's fat cattle. And you would see regular, and producers, some would finish a few more than others. Some might only finish a few a year. After BSE, that got to be tougher. You stop seeing that to quite a large degree. You don't see too many fat cattle move through the auction anymore. It's mostly calves. The bulk of any market is calves.
Yep.
Of course, you sell cows as they get older. There is a point where they kind of stop producing, and the calves are, sold kind of each year. You've got your calf crop, and you move it. But we, I don't know how else to, just give enough credit to the cattle producers, and on either side of the border, they all do a good job. They want the best for their animal.
Yep.
They take pride in it, and they care. I mean, the bottom line is they they care, and they want to do a good job. And, not everybody sees it from the outside. They don't see the cattle producer getting up February 15th at 1 a.m. to go check on the cows to see if they, if a cow needs help calving, and sometimes they need assistance. Sometimes hopefully they calve on their own. But it can be 30 below and you're getting up and going out of the house. Now, as technology improves a bit, there are camera systems today that are used quite a bit to help with that. So, we're progressing and things are improving but you still do have to get up to look at the camera.
Of course.
system, So
there's no automation, if you will, in the business. Difference between but because I've been to dairy farms, and does your business deal in dairy cattle? I don't know.
Yeah, to a bit. We'll sell some Holstein cows. But again, not big numbers. But there isn't, in the grand scheme, there isn't big numbers of dairies out this way.
Sure.
I mean, there's
they've shrunk, have they not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And different areas have a bigger dairy population than what we see kind of here in Manitoba, Saskatchewan. You see that more out west or down south. But there are some dairies around here, and we sell Holstein cows. Those are dairy cattle. We call beef cattle is what we refer to cattle, Angus, Simmental, Charolais, the main breeds of cattle. I'm sure everybody knows Angus beef.
Certified Canadian Angus.
Black Angus, certified Angus.
AAA diamond, baby.
And I love the Angus Association if you're watching. I love all the breed associations, but I don't know that you can really taste any different.
No.
If they've been, it's how they're fed. If they're fed the same, whether it was a Char, which is kind of a white or a tan cow, black or a red Angus, which is black or red. Simmental are now kind of mostly black or red, sometimes a little bit tan. There's other breeds too. But after it's been processed, if there was 3 steaks sitting on our table in front of us here, and they'd been all, and they'd all been fed the same. I truly don't think you would
tell the difference.
You or I or anyone else would be able to tell a difference. So the Angus Association has done I'd say the best job of marketing. And they kind of got ahead of the game compared to maybe some of the other breeds. But I've got we see a lot of Angus cattle at our market in this part of the world. They're Saskatchewan and Manitoba. We're seeing a lot of Simmental. We don't see, right in where we are at Whitewood, we don't see as many Charolais cattle. But there's good cattle in each and every breed. You see sometimes different breeds bring, maybe a little more of a premium or maybe a little less depending on them. And that has to do with, what weight they'll maybe finish at or how easily they'll convert pounds. Like anything else, there's good cattle, there's plain cattle or poor cattle, and there's every step in between. So, but the cattle in general from, one good thing, I guess, back to kind of BSE, one good thing that may be, good in quotations that came from BSE was because things were so tough, you had to try to get every penny you could. And I mean, when I say penny, it was pretty well pennies. So we likely did see an improvement in our herd as a result, where people started paying a little more attention to the cows that they were buying that they were going to use as breeding stock, to the bulls that they were buying that they were going to use as breeding stock. We likely did see an improvement, not right on in 2003, but following that would be something that I believe I've seen kind of in my time. I think cattle today are better, and you see more quality throughout a herd. Your typical average herd than you saw, 20 years ago.
Gotcha. Along with the size.
Yes.
Gotcha. I've got one more question. Tipping on an hour and 20 here, which is amazing. don't want to keep you too long, Rhett, but it's more for, it's kind of for me, more a listener question. We've got this great show on TV now that we're waiting for the return of called Yellowstone. That ranch, the 4-6s ranch, that sort of thing. What's their operation doing? They're moving them around to different pastures. They're a producer. They're just...
Well, I'll be honest, and I haven't watched a whole lot of Yellowstone.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I, of course, I know the show, and I've been meaning to. I just haven't quite got to it. But I mean, the basis behind it, besides taking people to the train station.
That's right.
Which hopefully doesn't happen too much with your local auction mark or auctioneer. You're moving cattle. At different times, you've got cattle out on grass, and you're gonna. You can do rotational grazing.
Yep.
And that's a way to maximize your use of your land.
Yeah.
And the cattle aren't just a dumb cow.
Yeah.
When we get into this time of year, when we start getting some colder weather, you go out to round up those cows, and lots of times they'll be kind of coming to that gate in the morning of, like the gate that you dropped them off 5 months ago, or, in to put them out to pasture. They're ready to come home.
Yeah.
Because they know it's getting colder. You get a little bit of snow. They'll kind of be at that gate where you dropped them off. It's time to go home. They know the routine. Now, in saying that, sometimes they can be a little ignorant or a pain in the butt, and they know it's time to go home, but they don't want to go home too.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, in Yellowstone, I'm imagining they're probably moving the cattle from one area to another area. I think it's based out of Montana, right?
Yeah,
Wyoming.
yeah.
And so down there, you got some rockier terrain and a little different country than what we have here. It's a beautiful country down there. I've been down on a couple of bike trips.
The bikes,
and we got to get you on one of those trips.
Well, I just did, but I want you to finish the story, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't, after our conversation, start looking online at bikes.
Yeah, well, that would be
don't tell
that'd be good.
Yeah,
I won't. I'll keep it. It's never going to leave this room.
Don't
Nobody
let it
will
leave
know. But they would be moving cattle, from one quadrant to another, or rounding them up to possibly bring them home to market them or something to that degree.
Gotcha. Yeah, because obviously you have to. I did my not research, but looked into this whole 4-6s thing. You want to know where the name came from, that sort of thing, and why it's so grueling to send somebody down there. But they're like 200,000-300,000 acres down there of a ranch. And obviously moving them around, that's a crazy big area.
Well, we see it in different places, like out in BC, and with mountainous terrain. It isn't, here our pastures are, they're not 200,000-300,000 acres.
No, no.
They're a quarter or a section, or maybe multiple, but you can go out with your quad and you can drive all around it.
Yeah.
In relatively short order, quad or horse or side by side, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But when we've been on some of those bike trips down through Montana, Wyoming, you see areas where it's fenced off, but you don't see any cross fences. It's just you drive for miles and miles, and you look as far back as you can see to the mountains, and it's just all kind of grassland, all open.
Yeah.
And then you come across, there's like 10 cows here. And you're thinking, where are the rest? They'll be out there somewhere. They don't only have 10 out there.
Yeah.
But you don't see them. And I can only imagine what rounding up, even in our kind of smaller pastures compared to them, can sometimes, it doesn't always go as planned.
Sure.
Sometimes a fence gets broke, or an animal doesn't want to cooperate, or whatever the case is. But at least we're dealing with maybe a quarter section or a section, whereas they're dealing with miles and miles and miles and rocky terrain and things like that. It would be interesting to see, but I don't know if it would necessarily be for me.
No, I'm with you. They just, the show emphasizes the cowboy and the persona of a cowboy, and we've got cowboys here. We just, we're not wrangling, and as you said, all the time in horses. We got motorized vehicles to do that. And
there's still lots that use horseback, but myself, the only horse I ride is like an iron horse, like a motorcycle.
Gotcha.
I haven't been on a horse since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think at this point, I may just stay off.
Yeah. I know you got them Shetland ponies for Noah at the livestock there.
Oh,
to
yeah.
wrangle them up. Yeah.
He's riding Big Red, we call him. So,
oh man, this has been awesome, Rhett. Like, I've known you for so long, but I'm so glad we got to have this conversation because there's a lot of very interesting and informative facts about what you do and that I didn't know. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed, I've watched a number of episodes like online and stuff, and I've enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed the one with your brother.
Yeah.
Just because of our tie, our relationship together. And you edit this part out about me saying, hopefully we see you on one of these bike trips with your dad and my dad.
Yeah.
That's always a great time. And thanks for having me here today. It's been awesome, and all the best to you.
Thanks, man. Well, you'll see me on a bike trip. I don't know when, but you will. I promise you.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.